The Knights of Ren podcast is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., your source for Star Wars Destiny singles, sealed product, and more. Check them out at coolstuffinc.com.
Show me again the power of the darkness.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll. D20radio.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Knights of Ren, episode 305. With me this week are Rick and Jay. How are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing fine.
Great. So, Jay, why don't you lead us off with, something that's on your mind?
So, as you can't escape it, as you look at all the discussions on all the forums and Facebook and everywhere you go, the Discord chats, just sort of this general distaste towards the meta and the direction of the game. And everyone's kind of wondering, with the eventual release of Empire at War, can this game turn around? Does this game need some changes now or later? Does this game truly have systemic problems, or do we not have enough of the pieces of the puzzle yet because the game's so new? And a lot of you guys ask us these questions, and we'll even admit in the past we've sort of skirted around topics like this, but we feel comfortable kind of talking a little more candidly today about this stuff, since we really just can't escape it. It's on everybody's minds. So I want to start things off by kind of sort of giving us a timeline of how we got here and how Destiny is shaped up and how we hit this point. So first, it goes without saying that there are a lot of problems, with just how the game launched and distribution and being able to get cards and things like that. And that stuff can't be ignored, but I kind of want to talk about the game without that in mind, but I just wanted to address it. So we had the Awakenings meta, and we got tastes of, weird and strong stuff, and there was action cheating, but although I've kind of gone balloon in the face trying to explain that action cheating has always been a part of the game, I can't change your mind or your opinion or tell you you're wrong on how you perceive the game, and I don't want to come off like that. So if you really perceived Destiny as a game with it sprinkled as opposed to a core part, that's fine, but regardless, we're in the situation we are now as Spirit of the Rebellion came out, and there's just sort of a lot that happened really, really fast. So SOR came out, and we got all these new powerful tricks, but on top of that, we also got a whole lot of store championships just sort of dropped on top of us. Our tournament season was already thrown out of whack. We started with Worlds, and now we're suddenly we're in store champs, and then all these large scale events. We just got the cards. Everyone wants to catch up and do what they can to win and play hard, and depending on your area, you have either a lot of store champs or very few or none. But no matter what, it also had a dramatic effect on all the regular spring kit tournaments, where people who wanted to do good in store champs wanted to bring their best stuff and play meta and smash face and take a little bit out of the casual events so that they had better odds at the store champs. So then in some ways, even general tournaments weren't fun because they kind of had a store champ feel. It was harder on new players. Even in my local area, there were a lot of players who only had SOR cards, and even if you opened really well and you got the full Palpatine suite, it is harder without holocrons and things like that. So when these players come in, and even if they opened well in the SOR arena or not, playing against these veterans of Awakenings with their fully tuned decks using everything, the game was a lot harder and a lot more aggressive just coming out of the gate. And while I feel that isn't super uncommon in a lot of games, I feel for how new and impressionable Destiny is, I do think that kind of hurt the game a little. I mean, it's hard to schedule all these kinds of things at once, and I know they're trying to catch up and do a lot with the game and get it in our hands and keep it exciting and dropping sets and things like that. And like, the tournament gears are always going, but I really think that it sort of all like bubbled and came to a head right as SOR dropped. I mean, it dropped like during Worlds, and as soon as we all got home, like it was SOR time, and then store championships like left and right. And I know a lot of stores just really want to get theirs out there and get people coming, and like a lot of them just like, I feel like most of the store champ season in many areas is over, and there's still 2 more months, which is kind of crazy to me. Like there's 2 more store champs, one in July and one in August period, that's left for the surrounding area in California, and we've already had like, I'm going to round it to like 10, which is just kind of crazy to me. And so it really was just like all hands on deck, everyone playing as hard as they can. And so like these cards and these strategies and these metas like all came to a head really fast, and it was very frustrating just in people who weren't used to the new speed, the new cheats, the new uninteractivity, and then trying to get new people to play and make sure they have fun, and even just having fun yourself. Everyone has their own opinions on like how the meta has shaped their opinion of the game, and I know people who've quit. They're just straight up said like, I thought Destiny was one thing, it was another, and I'm done. They sold out and they were out of it, and it really bums me out. And while part of me feels like, it's a little too soon to judge, and the devs have already shown that they're willing to errata, so maybe something's coming. We don't know. And also, we don't know what Set 3 has. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend or lie to you guys and say, like, Set 3 will fix everything. Like, it probably won't. And even to some degree, it'll probably introduce new issues. I mean, that's honestly how card games work. Things shift, new toys, different strats move around. I mean, one of the biggest jokes that like people laugh about between Awakenings and SOR is that like Django was like one of the most terrifying dominating guys for a while. I mean, he barely made it to Worlds, but for a long time people are like, Django with his ability to action cheat, he's always going to be good. No one plays Django. He's just a distant memory now. And he was a really good, solid character. He's even really good with bait and switch. But yeah, just we got so much good new stuff. And to me, I just think it was too much too fast. What do you guys think?
So I'm going to go back to, the initial point of the topic there. And while, yes, the action cheating, quote unquote, was in Awakenings, and everybody at a tournament level was looking for ways to capitalize upon that, it wasn't something that you could do repeatedly over and over and over again, without, with the exception of maybe Ray and Starship Graveyard being able to recur the Holdout Blaster and things like that. You had, your hit and runs, Ray with her ability, and ambush cards and things like that. But after that, it was kind of falling down into the realms of all in, being able to shift your focus into usable sides and be able to resolve them immediately. And then, of course, Django at the time. Everybody was able to kind of, after maybe a few weeks, be able to figure out how to beat the Django Veers meta, and then the menace, and then it just completely disappeared off the map. We're kind of in the same situation right now, especially, you can see that Pomaz, while, dominant in the early phases of this Spirited Rebellion meta, has kind of died down a little bit. You still see it winning a couple store championships here and there, but it's nowhere near like what it was for the first couple weeks. You would see, Pomaz 3 out of the top 4 decks in the standings, and now it just kind of happens to win here and there. And that's not taking anything away from the people that are playing the deck. I mean, a good player with a good deck is going to be favored to win anyway. But it's, with the exception of, God rolls and God draws out of Pomaz, it's extremely easy to beat. If you have a game plan to take care of it, then you'll beat it more often than you think you will, right? With my small sample size in tournament decks or tournaments with playing against Pomaz, I've yet to lose to it. But that's not to say that I'm the Pomaz master, but I have a game plan, I stick to it, and come out on top with it. We have, with the Spirit of Rebellion hitting, we got an influx of more of these cards that are kind of bringing it to a head, but it's still not to the point where it's completely uninteractive, like we see pop up here and there on the boards and the Facebook groups and such. But it's at a point now where if your opponent rolls well and draws well, you have very little time to do anything to fight it. When you have Vader Raider decks that are running with 4 strikes and bait and switches and fast hands into 4 speeds and things like that, you if they're rolling well, you're not going to beat it. There's literally nothing you can do against it. When you throw in the third problem child of Vibro Knife being able to not even be able to shield against it. Shields were the proactive way of mitigating damage without having to get rid of the dice. But now with those 3 things happening all at once, it's very hard to fight it. But it makes you look into other cards that you may not have looked into in order to try and find a way to beat it. If you attack the Vibro Knife die when you get a chance, and then you can shield off the other stuff with either Force Illusions or standard shield stuff that you would use any other way, it's basically back to where you were. The problem is, though, that you have to dedicate slots to your 30-card deck in order to be able to deal that. And it's gotten to the point right now that it is actually worth that. It is worth running things like Confidence for, the worst end of the spectrum, which is going to have your opponent resolve a die against you and resolve that 1 damage on a Vibro Knife so that you can block the rest of the damage that might be coming in later. That's not something that you would want to play in a normal 30-card deck, but when it can be used to save unblockable damage like that, now you're looking into the realm of being able to have to play that sort of stuff. Now, while I agree with you that it kind of shifted into basically went from like second gear, kind of cruising along, it accelerated really quick, and we didn't get a whole lot of time to really digest it before Store Championships came in, but we're getting to the point now where we can see, things that are heavily played, ways to counteract it, and then be able to use it going into regionals. With that being said, Empire War is right around the corner, which we have no idea how that's going to affect things. Hopefully, we'll see things, since this was a set that was supposedly designed after, Awakenings and, Spirit of Rebellion was tested pretty fully, taking into account what players have said since the release of the game. Maybe we'll see things shift in a better direction.
So since you brought up Vibro Knife, I want to get into some things regarding it that I think is really interesting in sort of how Destiny has been shaped and evolved in only 2 sets. I personally don't think Vibro Knife is like a terribly designed card. It does do a lot. It's strong. It is meta warping. And the thing that I've come to terms with personally, and granted, this is kind of frustrating, is that I really just think the card came out too fast. I think it changed the structure of how we perceive Destiny too much too quick, and if there were more cards that could interact with it, if we had more time, let's pretend it came out in set 3 and we didn't have it right now, where there's a world where shields are way more prevalent. There's a ton of good shield cards in Hero right now as we speak, and as much as people like to argue how strong Rey Qui-Gon is, and it's sort of can be dependent on how many Vibro Knives you see at the end of the table, that deck can be ridiculous and bulletproof. And while I'm not saying either option's better, it is unfortunate that Vibro Knife it changed things so quickly, we don't even know what it would be like to not have it now. And I think that's really unfortunate, because again, I do think in an environment where there's more cards, where there's more answers, where there's more stuff going on, and there was just a period where shields could be good, because they were fine in Awakenings. I mean, a lot of people slotted in dug-ins, and, they also introduced cool shield cards in set 2, Personal Shield and Caution and things that really amped those up. And to me, I know people won't agree with this, but I really feel like Vibro Knife is fine. It just changed the way people feel about shields quicker than they even got to enjoy them, and now it's just gonna be there as a card that could eventually cycle out. That's fine, but at the same time, it has change the landscape, which I think is the frustrating part, where like I do feel like, again, if there are more cards, if there was a longer period where people got to, you know, have fun with shields, and then this kind of silver bullet came in, I don't think people would hate it as much. I mean, I'm not even counting like Ray shenanigans and stuff. I mean, that's a whole, we'll get to that. But I'm just saying, like, as a card on its own, I just think, yeah, it was too soon, which sucks. Because I honestly think it's a good card, a fine card. But what do you guys, like, do you guys have opinions?
So while I think that Vibro Knife was exactly what Melee needed in order to be competitive, because if you look at, you know, the Awakenings meta, it was very few Melee oriented decks that were running around. You had Vader Raider, of course, but that's a whole other topic. You know, without Vibro Knife showing up, it was basically just a ranged fest. You would, you know, have your, you know, core dice that would enable you to do the huge modified chunks that you could do with range, you know, and that was the meta, right? It was, you know, started off with Django Veers and moved on to, you know, Django Bala Trooper, Phasma Trooper, things like that, where it was, you know, all ranged all the time. And, you know, in Northern Virginia, people got to the point where they felt that ranged was just too easy to play at a casual tournament. So they decided to start trying to build, you know, Melee decks that they could play and have fun. But they weren't, you know, top tier, quote unquote, to be able to actually compete and to win a large scale event. And then Vibro Knife came along and they gave the push that, you know, Melee needed. Unfortunately, it pushed it way too hard, and it got to the point where it's completely invalidating a whole, you know, part of the game. You know, I said it last week that heroes have very situational and die-dependent dice control in the game. A lot of their defensive abilities come from shields, being able to withstand an attack and then be able to deal with what's left. And when you have a thing that can completely invalidate your whole shield strategy and you're left with your situational dice manipulation, it's a bad combination, right? Now, yes, it does push the hero blue, you know, melee focused characters into a playable territory now, where like Qui-Gon Rey was not really there at Awakenings. It needed a couple things to get there. It became there, but unfortunately, because of Vibro Knife, which helped to push it to where it needed to be, it also pushed it back into a good enough to play, a good enough to do well, but not good enough to win with deck. You know, I played it in a store championship and I did reasonably well with it, but the problem lies in the dice control there. When you have to roll out and you have to have very specific dice hit the table in order to deal with what your opponent is doing, you needed those shields in order to withstand and then be able to take care of it. But with Vibro Knife, it puts it completely out of, you know, it's pointless to run shields right now. If your meta is completely Vibro Knife dependent right now, it's a waste of card space. They're not going to be relevant. It's just not worth it at this point. And it really pains me to say that because I really like Hero Blue. I like Luke. I like Qui-Gon. If Rey's dice were any better, she'd be broken. But you know, she's there because that's what heroes are built around right now, is things like Rey and Maz. And if you're not running those two, you're probably not going to do too well.
I like Jay's approach. I used to be a history major before I went into television and film, so I'm going to take that route. And the first issue that really came up with Destiny was they trotted it out and made it this really unique and dynamic and wonderful presentation of this experience you could have. And right off the bat, all three of us, most people who were at the forefront of the game, looked at this going, you know, there's dice, there's cards, that's a lot of variance, that's a lot of uncontrollable parameters. I don't really know how I feel about it. And then they started to kind of peel that onion away and say, well, you know, there's focus, and you can ditch a card to reroll as many dice as you want. And we've got card effects that allow you to flip dice to the sides you want and resolve them without, you know, really being stopped. And it was like, okay, this game is interesting. I want to play it. And then the, you know, just horrendous news came out that there's not enough product for everybody, and good luck, have fun, and we hope you play this game. And so locally, out here in Orlando, there were just a few of us who actually knew about the game. I would wager maybe 10 people, like legitimately, who knew like what this was, what it was going to be, and prepared to buy product. And so when, Store X opened up and they had limited supply, we all ran there and bought them out. And then, store number 2, same thing. Store number 3, same thing. And, we all got just enough product to have competent decks. And then once people saw us playing, they were like, what's this game? Hey, it's Destiny. It's really fun. Can I play it? No, sorry. You can borrow my deck, but you can't buy it. And like almost instantaneously, this light bulb of inspiration kind of was dimmed out by the fact that someone sees a game they want, but they can't have it. And that was just kind of the first issue that really happened with the game. Was it was restrictive to, if you knew about it up front and you had the money up front, you could play the game, because there were people who knew about it but didn't have, enough funds allocated to buy a whole booster box. They might have bought like one starter and some boosters, because a lot of the game stores, the ones I talked to, said, they were under the impression that this was a first wave of many. So they didn't have any allocation. They didn't have any limits. If you showed up and bought a whole box or 3 boxes, that was fine, because, their pipeline was saying, yeah, you're going to get more booster boxes next week. Don't worry about it. And then the terrible news came, we don't have any more. And the stores had sold out. They didn't keep any product for any kind of tournament support, because once again, they got the understanding that there was more in the pipeline. Don't worry about it. And so, tournaments were kind of small because there was no prize support. It was just store credit. But, players want packs. There's, players who would show up and get just crushed because they didn't buy more product than somebody who had a full Vader Raider deck. And so they were very, they weren't like mad, but they were just kind of disappointed because they felt that they were at a disadvantage because they didn't buy enough product, or they didn't get lucky enough pulls in case they happened to buy a decent amount of product. So it was just kind of rocky at the start trying to sell the game to people, because there were so many things happening simultaneously where, you're trying to fight this front of, you can't buy the product. And if you didn't buy enough product, you're just not going to win. And there's nothing to win if you do win. So then we get past that point, and people who were really awesome, big shout out to Technical, or Mark in real life is his name. He's on our Discord channel. He had plenty of product. He had extras, and he was giving stuff away to people. He was going to stores and like, hey, I'll literally trade you a Millennium Falcon for like 5 rares or 2 rares. Like, he was just doing a lot of great things in the community, just helping get people what they needed. I tried to help give people the extra uncommons and commons and rares I didn't need. I barely had a full set, so I didn't really have any leeway with legendaries myself, but there were plenty of like holocrons and holdout blasters and jetpacks and things. I was like, give me, something that's just not fair and trade, just so people could have product. So I say all of that because that really set the core foundation for the game here in Orlando. So after that point, we lost a lot of people, understandably. There were some people who found out about the game once Spirit of Rebellion was being announced, and they got really excited, and they got their hands on the new wave of starter sets, and then they got their hands on Spirit of Rebellion, and then we started to have a lot of growth in the meta out here, and that was great. A lot of people were excited. There was trades between Spirit of Rebellion and Awakening, so people's collections were starting to kind of fill out if they weren't able to organically purchase Awakenings. And then the whole understanding of the game in terms of action cheating and efficiency started to then become the forefront once people started to see, oh hey, Pomaz is efficient. Oh hey, Pomaz is really good. Oh hey, Pomaz is quote unquote like OP broken. I don't know how to beat this, whatnot. And so Destiny is kind of now in that state here in Orlando where people are trying to figure out what to do about Pomaz. A lot of players are gravitating towards it because they can win their store championships with it. A lot of people, on the other side of that coin don't like it because they feel it's similar to Magic the Gathering with some of the old Red Deck Wins games where certain decks would just kind of play themselves. You didn't really have to do much other than sit down, play the deck, and the game would kind of flush itself out organically. Either you won very early because you just pressed a serious advantage, or you didn't get the cards you need, you didn't get the plays you need, and you lose. And it was like, cool, let's just go to game 2, game 3, go to another game, because it didn't really matter. You weren't actually like processing stratagems and data to win. It was just, do I get the card I need? Great. Do I win? Great. And there are some issues where that's facilitated through certain perceived cards. People think, Fast Hands is the problem, Poe is the problem, Maz is the problem. I think some of these things are true. I think there are some game designs and some game balance issues where the game isn't broken, but there are specific combinations that are significantly more efficient than others. And in terms of, mathematical calculations, why wouldn't you play such a deck? Like, why not play a deck that has a mathematical efficiency advantage that just makes logical sense to say, I could play this deck that I think is fun, or I could play this deck that is probably going to win. And, like Jay and Rick have said, out here, there's been store championships, and I don't blame people. They want to win. So why not play a deck that wins as opposed to a deck that's fun? And I think that creates this kind of stigma where people are looking at Destiny going, man, this meta is kind of yucky because I want to play a deck that's fun. Like, I want to play with Snap. I want to play with Unkar. I want to play with such and such. But am I going to win? I don't know. Probably not. So I guess I want to win, so I'm going to play Pomaz, but I don't really care because I don't want to play Pomaz. I think that's kind of affecting the overall perception of the game is like, you're in this camp of, do I want to win or do I want to have fun? And, for store champs, you want to win a mat. You want to win a promo card. You want to win a regional buy. So you play what wins. And that's just troublesome because that feels like the game design is not in a great place. It doesn't necessarily mean the game is unhealthy or it's dead. It just means like in a design aspect, it's in a place where you're forced to pick one or the other. And I don't think that needs to necessarily be a player decision. I think a good game and a healthy game can say, I can play a deck that's fun and can win tournaments, not one or the other. And, when you're talking about Vibro Knife and things of that nature, I work on game design. I've helped develop a couple board games. I've helped do some consulting work for, third-party board game development. And one of the things we look at and we work on is, when you're developing a game, you really try to have a core mechanic of said game that doesn't either invalidate or push players to not utilize another game mechanic. And I say that about Vibro Knife. I don't think the card is broken. I do think it came out a little bit too early because, like I said early on, the game is very young and we had just gotten our feet wet with Awakenings. And it's like, hey, here's this really interesting mechanic called shields. And you can use this to absorb damage and essentially extend your sustainability and your life to numbers that aren't physically printed on a card. So, Qui-Gon can get, +1, +2, +3 life through shields, and you can stay alive a little bit longer even if you're weaker because these shields will kind of help give you some, defensive edge. That's great. That makes certain cards way more interesting and makes Guardian much more useful. But then also, of course, the shields are very powerful and you need some kind of balancing mechanic. So in Awakenings, we have TIE Fighter, which unfortunately nobody used, but the special ate all shields on all of your opponent's characters, which didn't really matter because nobody played it. But we did have Intimidate, which for 0 resources just looked at a character and says that character has no shields. So shields were kind of balanced where you didn't want to just go ham because your opponent could potentially just wipe them all off, but it wasn't like they weren't important. And when you roll the shield side, you felt like that was a possible resolution you would want. So then we come to Spirit of Rebellion, and Vibro Knife comes out. And now we have kind of this weird issue where shields aren't a die face you legitimately want to resolve if your opponent has the Vibro Knife running potential deck. And I feel as a game designer, this was kind of a mistake that everyone could have it. I feel like this would probably have been better if just heroes could have had it, just because, as we've said before, like heroes and villains are not inherently fairly balanced in terms of options and abilities that they have in the card pool. And giving heroes Vibro Knife, just heroes, I don't know if it would have been necessarily unbalanced or unfair, but it would have been something that not everyone could just throw into their deck and, use to crush shield players. But back to my actual point, the fact that if you're looking at a deck that's got a Vibro Knife on the table, or that they run Vibro Knife in the list, whenever you roll a shield side, it's almost like a blank because you don't want to resolve it because it's probably not going to do anything. You want to spend that card to reroll it to get something you feel gives you value from that die face. And so that kind of bothers me as a player and as a designer, that one of the core actions you would take from the dice is almost not feasible anymore, which means that, you've essentially kind of nipped one of your own options in the bud. It'd be like some kind of meta where resolving resources was a bad idea. It's like, that's kind of important and you want that, but now you have cards and decks that just kind of spit around it and don't care. So, like I said, I don't feel that Vibro Knife is broken or anything like that. I just feel like it's just not great design for players because you essentially just blanked out some dice and now they're just not as efficient. And that's not fun.
So the next thing I think we all want to talk about is what I think are kind of the big three in this sort of like cheap meta that came with SOR, and that is Fast Hands, Maz, and Force Speed. And just some interesting things about, first off, like how they were perceived when they were revealed, and then how they evolved as like the meta and the set went on. Because like, I'll be honest, like I'm still really on the fence with Fast Hands. I think the card, like, I mean, is obviously frustrating to play against. There isn't a window to react, but if your opponent rolls poorly or they roll and they still want their sides to do things with their weapons and their modifiers, like, I really wanted Fast Hands to feel like it's sort of like checked itself already, but when it's good, it's scary. And when you're rolling like an elite dude and one of your dice gets the side you want, like it may as well have not mattered. And I get that. And I do agree that Fast Hands is a little gross. Looking at Force Speed, it is kind of funny how often I see now like Force Speed not get resolved unless it's just in the obscene like Ray trains that happen where she plays a Force Speed and then she plays a holdout or a Vibro Knife, and then she gains enough actions to roll out her other character and then hit you for 8. And you're just like, and why am I here? Like, none of us are saying like any of us enjoy that. But my main point is that, like, again, I think like if just this set had Fast Hands or just this set had Force Speed or just Maz, I don't 100% feel like these three cards are innately terrible. I mean, I do have some personal opinions. I am still, even to this day, surprised that Force Speed doesn't have a cost. But then I just wonder if there's, removal coming down the line that cares about that. But I still think, like, hopefully going on, like, we really don't see many more zero cost die cards. That's just my personal opinion. And then things going forward, like, I think Maz was a little too free in her design. A lot of people have suggested things like, maybe only manipulating one or resolving one die or her own die, or, die that's equipped to her, or just a yellow. And, my personal opinion, I kind of think like she could get reined in just a hair and still be scary. I mean, heck, in my personal meta, one of my friends uses Maz a lot, and he just likes to throw a bowcaster on her, and Maz was just a bowcaster in a vacuum is horrifying because she's almost always just shooting you for 4. And like, sometimes I look at that and I'm just like, that's enough. That's all you need right there. Just give her a bowcaster and just start headshotting people. It's kind of crazy. But again, the point overall I want to make is like, the unfortunate truth is that we got all of this so quickly. And again, everyone experienced a different one of these cards, or some of these cards more, or some of these cards in conjunction. And yeah, it gets really nasty when Maz is interacting with Fast Hands, on a Poe, and you get like the worst of both worlds, or like Ray's, you're dropping Force Speed and Fast Hands on Ray, or Ray's teamed up with Maz, or I mean, there's so many permutations. And of course all the other stuff, like, again, Ray on her own is frustrating, or all the ambush shenanigans that still carried over from Awakenings. I really just think like in isolation these cards aren't necessarily a problem, but they all came at once, and again, that's the reality we live in. And so while I try to look at them and just be like, if we just had Fast Hands, I feel like in a lot of cases it'd be okay. Again, especially if, I don't know what kind of answers could come, but if they did, if there were just more ways to work around it or regain those action windows. And I'll say right here too, like, even if Empire at War comes with some removal options, I mean, that's still contingent on you getting whatever that card is before they get, 3 or 4 activations off fast hands. It could not matter either way, even if the card exists. So just waiting on a card to be a silver bullet in and of itself doesn't fix it. And hoping they don't dry. I mean, it's not the game we live in. I see a lot of people suggest, like, well, fast hands, what if you only limited it to 1? I'll tell you right now, games that do that, that's actually just even more frustrating to lose against, because you'll play against, if you play in that meta and then your opponent gets fast hands turn 1, did it change anything? I mean, for the purposes of what happened, I mean, sure, they can't play 2, but it's still, like, sort of being the scourge that it ever was. And I don't think making a lot of these unique is enough of a fix to deter how much impact these cards have as quickly as they do, because, like, you only need the 1 fast hands before you get a second one. Now, I understand what people want. Let's say you make it unique and then removal becomes more relevant. Well, then, not knocking off 1 feels better than having to knock off 2, or maybe they have to search for it, their second one. Like, I get where the unique argument comes from. At first, I thought it was a little silly, but especially since, like, unique is supposed to mean, like, these are, like, important things that have, like, significant relevance or are a unique item. And I do find it funny when people suggest, like, Planetary Uprising and fast hands get unique, but I get it as a gameplay mechanic. They just want to see less of it regardless of theme. So, like, I hear you, and I'm not saying you're wrong for hoping for that, but I just don't know if that, like, nips it fast and hard enough that it makes it any less oppressive. So I'm not sure if those are the right, like, band-aids to hope for. I mean, maybe Planetary, because having 2 to deal with is, like, nightmare fuel. I get that. It just turns the game into, like, inevitability. But the points that I kind of wanted to make again are just, like, it just sucks that we got so much at once and they worked well together and they synergize. And so I don't exactly know what the fixes are. I don't think every card, if they need to be fixed, I don't think all of them do. I mean, that's just my opinion. Like, the thing you have to realize is even if, let's pretend we took the 10, what everyone universally felt like were the 10 most egregious cards for all of Destiny right now, and hit them so hard, either they were less playable or unplayable. Like, cream rises to the top. Like, it would just create a new frustrating meta at worst. Or the other thing you have to be careful of when you just cut too much stuff out is you just cut out a lot of what makes the game, like, interesting. Like, it's true. I mean, if you made everything balanced, or if you toned everything down, like, then the game, for the most part, would not be fun. I mean, that's just, I know a lot of people probably won't agree with that. And the point I'm trying to make is, like, it's not that you don't need to change things. It's that a little goes a long way. And when you go crazy, you just create new problems. But I want to hear what you guys think about, like, these cards in particular, and then, like, what should, or do you think anything needs to happen?
So I'll be the first to admit that when I first saw fast hands, now granted, I was only concentrating on the Awakenings meta because that's what I was going to be playing at Worlds, and I wanted to get as much testing focused on that as I could. I thought fast hands was not good at all. Right. I thought, why would I take up an upgrade slot on a character to be able to resolve my die right away? 2, I thought of it only in the damage sense because you're got a picture of a guy shooting guns, right? So why would I want to take my 1 non-modified side and risk not being able to use any of my modified sides? But then after actually getting some playtime with it, I saw how oppressive it can be with non-damage side dice, right? So yeah, if they're going to resolve their 3 damage die, I mean, they resolve their 3 damage die. There's not a whole lot I can do about the 3 damage sides anyway, so might as well just get it out of the way. It's coming. Maybe I'll block it with shields or not. But the problem then lies in the fact when you have, characters with 2 disrupt sides that they can roll out and immediately resolve, or they're equipped with the fast hands or with a force speed and immediately resolve that force speed to take more actions to resolve or to activate another character and, re-roll or resolve their damage size against me. So now I'm taking something that I had been able to plan against, and there's no way that I can really interact with it. It's just going to hit me in the face, and I'm going to take it, and then hopefully I can respond with some stuff. So yeah, I was wrong. Fast hands is really good, and you're probably going into any deck that can play it, and you're going to put it on a character, and you're not going to pay any resources for it, and that's a problem. But you can't deal with it once it's out there. You got Imperial Inspection that can bounce it back to their hand, but it's a 0 cost, so they're just going to replay it again and then roll out. It's not like you have a window of after the character is activated to be able to bounce it back to their hand to where they're not going to use it, because then they don't care. They'll just put it on another character and resolve it then, right? And if you remove it before they activate, they just take an action. So, I mean, the basis of it is that, if it was limited to damage sides, it wouldn't be so oppressive, right? If it was, only a certain character type or something like that, if it was heroes, or if it was villains, I don't think that would change anything, because it would just push one of those more into an unbalanced area. And I mean, to be honest, FFG intentionally, or maybe intentionally, doesn't develop their games to where there's complete balance to one side or the other when they have faction type games. They do it in all of their LCGs to where it kind of rotates to where at some point one faction or the other is more powerful than the others. We just happen to be in a situation right now, since from the start villains have been more playable in the competitive sense, just due to the dice mitigation and what they have at their disposal. But that, I assume that's going to change at some point. Maybe Empire at War will do that, but I don't know if changing one thing really fixes the whole issue. The fact that there's 0 cost, I think, is a calculated decision, being that you can't overwrite them in order to get more powerful stuff, which I'm not quite sure what is more powerful than those right at the moment. But, it's made to be something that is good. Like Force Speed is made to be something that is good in the early game, and then kind of the use of it teeters off near the late game. So making that have a higher cost would have just made it more incentivizing to override it later on for something more powerful. Fast hands taking up the slot does help a little bit, but I've noticed in designing my decks now that I went from pushing it to where it was almost half dice cards and half control and other event type stuff, and I've gone down to where I'm limiting to possibly as low as 6 dice in my entire deck, so that really doesn't even make a difference now that I'm taking up an upgrade slot. It's a combination of all of these things that hit all at once and how good they are together that's kind of put it into a point where we're at right now, where people are calling for bans and erratas and restrictions and things like that. But hitting one of them may make a difference. Hitting all of them just kind of makes it bad. It's a bad look for the game in general, especially for new people that are still coming into the game, that are going to open these cards, think they're so good, take them to a tournament and realize that they've been playing them wrong because they hadn't looked in the FAQ and found out that this was banned, or the words are different on this card than they show up in their physical copies. So I don't know where they go from here. It's probably going to take some removal of upgrades that is more than just get rid of a fast hands or something like that. It's going to have to be something that you're going to want to play in your deck, whether your opponent's playing a fast hands or not, just due to the 30 card deck nature. And we need some more of that right now. There's just no way to really get rid of these once they hit the table. You just have to deal with them. And the fact that they get around being able to deal with your dice as well, it makes it a doubly a two-edged sword, right? I can't get rid of the upgrade that helps you to where I can't get rid of your dice. Is just where we're kind of sitting at right now. If I could disarm a fast speed, I would play disarm. If I could disarm a fast hands or force speed or something along that, I would definitely play it. Right now, I can disarm a vibro knife, but I can't deal anything with the other problem children right now. I can kill Maz, but that only goes so far. That's where I'm kind of sitting at right now.
I have a lot of thoughts, and we have limited time in the show to discuss them, but all of the things you guys have said have reflected in my meta as well. And I think, well, I don't even think, like, this has been the biggest problem here locally is people sit down and talk to me and go, hey, tell me about Destiny. Okay. And then, all right, can I play a game? Sure, I've got plenty of decks. And then we play. And then they go, hey, can I borrow one of these for a tournament? Yeah, sure, that's fine. And then they come to the tournament and they experience Pomaz, or they experience fast hands or force speed. And then after the tournament, we sit down and we talk about, hey, what'd you think? Did you have fun? And they unanimously have said, I really like this game casually, but I really don't want to deal with whatever that deck was, and they're referencing Pomaz. And I really don't like that yellow card thing where they can just roll and like do whatever they want, which they're referencing fast hands. And it's almost unanimous across the board where people really enjoy the game. They think it's a lot of fun. They think it's really interesting. It's dynamic. It's unique, but they don't want to play in the tournament setting, which the game is essentially wanting to be played in. Like, you want to go to tournaments, you want to win packs, you want to win store championships. And so the people who are in it are already in it, but the crowd that's looking in doesn't want to participate because, either they can't buy product, they, still can't buy product, or they just have not a really pleasant experience because, let's be honest, when you're playing at these card shops and these, game stores, most people play other games. And it's hard to sell Destiny when they could play something else that's arguably better balanced. Not all games have perfect attendance in balancing and fairness, but a lot of the games out there are already established. They either have their ban list, their cycle, their rotation, and you know what you're getting. And if something is insanely overpowered, there's usually some kind of emergency ban or removal or modification. So most metas for, the major three games, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and Magic, are fairly healthy, but not perfect, of course. And so to try and say, hey, come play Destiny. Okay, sure. Also deal with Pomaz. Ugh, why? That's awful. I don't want to deal with that. Or, here's Ray with double force speed and a bunch of things they can do, and then Vibro Knife. Okay. No, I'm not interested in that. And so it's kind of this compound fracture that is causing the game to just kind of be strange. When I first saw Fast Hands spoiled, I accidentally thought it was villains only. And I was so excited because, as everyone knows, I played Jabba, and of course I was going to play Unkar. And those decks are so slow. And I was happy because I would actually get to do things at a reasonably fast pace. And then I saw it was, open to everyone. It was neutral. And I was just kind of like, uh-oh, this is going to be a little crazy because, you could throw this on so many people that are hero or villain and just come out of the gate swinging like game one. And people on forums and threads say, this card's oppressive, this card's broken. If that's how you feel about it, that's fair. My opinion of the card is that it's not a fun experience. And really, that's what games are about, is having a fun experience and playing with friends and having stories and going to events and having a great time. And if you've got cards and mechanics in the game, any game, not just Destiny, but, Destiny specifically, if you've got a mechanic or a card that is making games not fun and the community is not enjoying experiencing this aspect, then I don't think that's good for the game or the community at all, because people, they're not having fun and they're just talking about this card because it's not fun, in conjunction with Maz and Poe. And this kind of perfect storm has come up where you have a deck that's, like I said, incredibly efficient, and it does things much better than any other deck does right now in terms of efficiency for rolls, efficiency for turning dice to what you want them to be, resolving said dice, and getting the final resolution that you want in the end game. And so as a designer, a developer, a player, I don't think that's fun. I don't think that's great. And it's fair that the community is saying, we don't like it because it's not really that fun.
Yeah, in response to what you were talking about with, new players jumping into tournaments and not enjoying a game against like such as Pomaz or Vader Raider or something like that, where, these specific cards are on full showcase, right? Unfortunately, if you're going into a tournament right now, you're going to have to play against these decks. No question, they're going to be there, and, that may not be for everyone, right? But, you have to understand that going into the tournament. The big three that you said on card games, they all have those types of interactions in the tournament scene. People that are going to want to play tournaments are going to want to do well at the tournaments. They're going to want to play these types of decks. And if that's not for you, then you probably shouldn't go there with the intent that you're going to win the tournament, right? You will have fun. There are plenty of decks to have fun in this game. This game is an immense amount of fun, and a lot of the great stories that I have for this game have come on games that I've lost. It's getting crime lorded, turn 2 after doing everything I could to stop it is still one of my favorite things that has ever happened in this game, because it was just back and forth. You do this, I stop this, but you keep going here. You reroll. You have things to get you there, and I get crime lord. And I'm like, you know what? That was fun, right? But, it's you have to be in the mindset that I'm going to play against these decks. How am I going to beat them? Am I going to play these decks and do the same things that I don't think are fun? Or am I just going to enjoy this game for what it is, right? This game can be very exciting. The dice rolls, while frustrating sometimes, can be, the most enjoyable thing about it. And, there's plenty of decks that you can have fun with, right? And unfortunately, during store championship seasons, like I'm guilty of this, that I only get one day out of the week that I can go out there and play against somebody that's not named Todd, who I play with on Friday nights to test, for tournament stuff. And I'm going to want to try and play something that I'm going to play in a tournament. And, I had a post in my local Richmond group that they were looking, for, ways for the league to get more points for playing, different decks other than, those big Pomaz, Vader Raider, Emo Twins, things like that everybody plays at the tournaments. And, it kind of hit me that, unfortunately, I only get a certain amount of time, and what I want to play is not what, is apparently fun for other people out there. But I'm going to try and get my practice in for the tournament, because that's how I want to play this game. And, I'll tell them when I sit down across from somebody, it's like, look, I'm practicing for the store championship. Do you mind? And they're like, absolutely not. Go ahead. And I'm like, do you have something that's like one of these, meta decks? And they're like, no, I just have this. And I'm like, well, this is kind of, this is, a meta deck. And they're like, yeah, let's do it, and sometimes they win and sometimes they don't. But, you just have to know that these decks are out there and people are going to be playing them. And if you're not enjoying the tournament scene there's plenty of other ways to enjoy this game. Even the tournament scene is not completely one-sided with one deck winning. And that's a great testament to actually how balanced this seemingly unbalanced game is. The fact that it's not one deck that's dominating. It's not two decks that's dominating. It's not the deck that beats this one deck that wins this store championship. It's a myriad of decks that are winning. And it's not just villains. It's heroes are winning some of these store championships too. So while the game seems unbalanced, it is more balanced than a lot of these games are that are out there right now.
That's fair. The reason I said what I said about the new players was the community for Destiny is still very small compared to any other trading card game or collectible card game. And you really want the environment to feel inviting. And when a multitude of newer players experiences what the meta is and it's not inviting and it's not pleasant, I don't think that's a good thing for any game. And so that's more or less why I was saying, Fast Hands, Force Speed, Poe, and Maz might have been something that just wasn't understood in development. Maybe it was something that was never tested in that specific conjunction of Poe and Ma's fast hands, throwing everything at your opponent's face. There's no way to say because we don't know. We're not developers for the game. We know the developers and they're great people and I enjoy talking to them a lot. It's just that there's been a lot of people I know who've had the opportunity to play the game and get in at the ground level, and they're just not interested because they're not wanting to deal with that stuff when they can do something else. And I think that's not only a fair choice or opinion by any player, but I think that's a disservice to Destiny because it is an amazing game and it has a lot of variance and a lot of options and a lot of really unique strategic value in a card game. But the problem is, on surface level, you don't get to experience that. You get to experience one of very few decks. And if you try and do something outside of the current meta, it's generally not favorable. And I think that is a big disservice to the game as a whole.
I want to piggyback on what Rich said to a degree, which is that it is hard to see and it is frustrating, but I honestly think it needs to be celebrated more that the top of the meta are like 4 or 5 strongly considered tier 1 decks. Then we've got like 2 or 3 which are considered, I don't care how you divide it up, 1.5, tier 2, whatever. But like there's roughly 5 to 7 lists that you can take to an event and have a solid shot at winning, and that is something to be said about the game. And there are hero options. They're not the most fun for people, but they do exist. And again, like he said, like it's not the best deck, and then the deck that does okay against that, and then the deck that does okay against deck 2, and then it's sort of the rock paper scissors of matchups. But like the top deck just steamrolls anything else and doesn't care. Like, we don't really feel like that's necessarily the case, but these strong decks do have currently a lot of uninteractivity, which is a lot of what's frustrating people. So what's our takeaway? Like, what are we as the Knights of Ren trying to say? I mean, me personally, I feel like, again, more of the point of what I was trying to make earlier, if we killed the top 10 most hated cards, just have a new top 10. It's just, you can't pretend that like just fixing a few things fixes the whole game. I mean, there's things that like bend the rules and push against the ceiling, and that's just how games are designed. And while I do think like things do need to change, I do think a delicate touch is in order, and I do strongly feel like as the card pool expands and more removal options of all kinds, getting rid of dice, dealing with supports, dealing with upgrades, everything, like as just more cards come along and more characters that can play, that can take up these slots, that are strong and diversify and give people more stuff they want to do and do more cool things. I think the game is just really infant and really young, and to some degree these are issues that you would find in any game, like silver bullets and issues and decks that are just hard to deal with, and cards like Fiber Knife. Quick aside, like an example that I want to bring up to another game in FFG's history was I played a lot of Conquest, and a lot of my friends who played that game will definitely remember there is a very Viber Knife style card called Klavex War Leader, who I'll admit was one of my favorite cards in the game. I really liked playing the Dark Eldar, and one of the reasons was how cool and powerful that card was. Essentially, all he did was you could play him into the middle of a battle, and his effect was he could instantly kill a unit as long as it had damage on it. And what that kind of meta created was, it was very, very hard to justify playing expensive units for any team, because Dark Eldar were a very prevalent race. I mean, spoiler alert, Dark Eldar won the last Worlds event before the game died, and were pretty much a scourge throughout the history of the game. And one of the reasons was there was a card that made it so just playing heavy dudes was really difficult, and you were just turned off by it because you could pay 5, 6, 7, 8 of your resources on like a giant demon or a cool tank, and then this guy just pops into play and they're done. It was really frustrating for a lot of people wanting to play those like big huge units. And there was a card that came eventually that punished and killed him, but then that card had to go on your deck no matter what. You had to have it. You had to be able to pay for it. Just all these things where it was like, maybe something should have happened. And actually, the lead developer, Brad Andres, admitted that he wished that there was a conditional that he placed on him at some point throughout the history of the game to make him like, there's a tag called Elite in the game where the usually very expensive units also had the Elite tag, which gave them certain benefits. And he wishes he made it so he couldn't kill Elite guys, which would have made a lot of the cooler, fatter units much safer. And Klavik still would have been very playable, just not like the silver bullet that just wiped out entire strategies and in some cases most parts of certain factions. So the point I want to make with that is like, I do hope Fantasy Flight learns from their past, evaluates as hard as they can, realizes what changes they need to make for the future game health. Like there's just a lot of directions it can go. There's a lot of things that can be powerful, and there's always going to be things that are powerful. And just understand, like Rick was saying, like it's difficult for like your local scenes because there's always going to be players that want to improve themselves, that want to play with the best stuff, that want to play against the best stuff, and the game isn't worse for them as much as it is frustrating to sit across from them all the time, because they are trying to make you better at the game. It's one thing you should remember and consider is like, even in a game where you lost, but you still did well against some of those decks, like that's something to take pride in, or sometimes you'll beat them. And I'm not saying like you should be happy to just sit across Pomaz for an entire tournament and lose every round. Like that's not fun. That's not why you're playing the game. I'm not apologizing for like how toxic the game can feel, but there is some things to be said where like, this is just how the game is going to go to a certain degree, no matter what. Hopefully the game evolves more in a direction that's fun for you, that lets you play the types of stuff that you like, and emerges as the game grows. And just one of the great things about Destiny is like, we're going to get a whole slew of new characters, which are just going to open up even more possibilities for fun things, which honestly, compared to a lot of other games, I feel like Destiny has like so many cool directions that it goes just with the character and the points and figuring all that stuff out, that there are just as a lot of individuality and unique things that Destiny offers, and that's only going to get better as more stuff drops out. If you're frustrated now, maybe take a break, maybe watch for more spoilers for Empire at War. Like, even as an example, in my meta, there are some leagues that are in other districts that seem to be taking off and are fun for players. A couple of people have come to me and said, like, what if we banned a few characters or a few cards? And I struggle with that a little bit, because there's some cases where, like, I want the guy who only bought SOR cards to be able to play Palpatine. If he really wants to play Palpatine, like, I just don't want to just tell a guy, like, no. Like, that's just very weird and punishing to me. And, like, there are lists with Unkar that I don't think are as oppressive as others. And, like, my personal favorite, this guy comes up a lot, and I go back and forth on him, and I think I can't give too much of an analysis because I'm too biased, but I love FN2199. He's probably my favorite card in the whole game. And just one of the things that he does to me that I think is good, that drives a lot of people crazy, but he has fun with the variants of the game. I mean, you slap on a weapon and then you roll it out, and there's just a little bit of a lottery feel. Like, I've talked about him before, but like, I've been playing FN for the past month, and he's been very, very, very uncooperative, like to an insane degree, where I'll roll him out and he'll get disrupt sides, he'll get misses, he'll get resources. Like, resources tend to be good on him, but that's still not the constant assault and slew of damage. And I feel like to play him super well, so much of your deck has to be weapons, and then you don't have, like, often enough tools to keep him alive. And historically, like, he just dies on turn 2 often before I can even roll him out and hope to resolve naturally. So, like, yes, I cheated a bunch of crap and put a bunch of stuff in my discard pile and burned through my deck really quickly. I mean, yes, there's times where he's absolutely crazy, oppressive, and deadly, but I still think there's plenty of times where he just doesn't do anything, or so much of your game plan like relied on him, and when he falters or he explodes, then you're like really backpedaling and you're just drawing handfuls of weapons which your other characters are not as happy to see, unless, you know, you're converting stuff into like, you know, Z6 riot batons or something. But like, I honestly feel he has checks and balances built into his character.
My final thoughts on all of this is that, you know, with store championships and regionals around the corner, you know, play whatever you want to play and have fun doing it, right? If you want to play in a tournament and you just want to run whatever deck that you want to run, do it. And if that's how you have fun, that's how you have fun. If you want to go to a tournament and you want to win that tournament, then right now your deck has to be able to deal with these things. You have to ask yourself as you're building and as you're testing, can my deck beat Pomaz? Can my deck deal with Vader Raider with fast hands and force speed and Vibro Knife on Vader? Can my deck not roll over to Palpatine and all the damage that he can do with that? And can my deck do all of these things at once? And if it can, then good luck and win that tournament for you and have fun doing it. If it can't and you just want to play that tournament anyway and that's going to be fun for you, do that. Tournaments are always better when there's, you know, a lot of people there and everybody's having fun playing the game that they love. But just understand that these things are what we have to deal with right now. And until things change, you have to be able to be ready for them. You have to go in there knowing that you're going to face, you know, these things multiple times throughout the tournament. And if that's a negative play experience for you, then the tournament in general is going to be a negative place for you right now until anything happens, until FFG decides to change anything, or until FFG releases any more cards that can combat it in a more consistent fashion. But the game is still healthy. The game is still very much fun to play. Whether, you know, you're playing at your kitchen table or you're the tournament player that wants to go and drive 2 hours for a store championship. If this is how you want to play it, then you should play it. If you don't like playing against Pomaz, you probably don't want to go to a tournament because it's going to be there. If you don't like playing against Vader Raider, then you shouldn't go to a tournament because it's going to be there. If Palpatine just destroys your deck, then you don't want to play Palpatine because it's going to be there. But it is perfectly within your rights to play this game with your friends and at your league nights and at your local shop and have plenty of fun doing it.
My last thought just kind of comes from Fantasy Flight. The developers, they've all said they listen to the feedback, they read the forums, they're trying to, you know, actually make changes based on what the community is saying. And my last point is, all right, then let's see it. Let's see them do it. Let's see them actually react to the things that the community wants to see, the community has to say, you know, make the things that you're saying as a company actually happen. And I think they will. We'll have to wait and see what they're going to do, but that's pretty much my challenge is, you know, you can say as much as you want, but unless you actually act on those things, it's just a lot of hot air. So I'd love to see things happen. And, you know, people who've been around who remember Netrunner, there were a lot of cards that stuck around way longer than they should have. There were some quote-unquote counter cards that came out that just didn't really help the game. They just kind of helped Silver Bullet very specific situations. And, you know, it took too long for them to errata. It took them too long to ban. It took them too long to remove the specific cards that were causing cancer in the game. And, you know, unfortunately, Netrunner is not as big and as popular and as widespread as it used to be. And that's just a fact. And I would hate to see that with Destiny, but we're a community. We're not the business. We're not the developers. We're not printing the cards or designing the game. And we can say as much as we want. And if they won't do anything with it, then that's just really sad because I like Destiny a lot. I think it's a magnificent game, but if people are playing it not having fun, and if people who are outside of the game looking in don't want to play, and, you know, if the community doesn't think that certain decks are fun, then, you know, that's fair. That's totally fine. And if nothing changes, then that's just going to be the overall consensus for the game is, hey, Pomaz isn't fun. Hey, Fast Hands isn't fun. Hey, I don't like playing this game because that's all I ever see. Sure. That's totally understandable, and I think that's a fair statement and a fair opinion and a fair way to feel about something that's not a fun game experience. And, that's really all I have to say is we've said our piece on the show. The community has said its piece, and I hope that FFG has heard us, and I hope they make the necessary adjustments, and I really hope that moving forward, coming up with this next season from Empire at War and whatever else comes down the pipeline, that we have a fun experience with cards that don't necessarily have to be balanced, but cards that don't create this oppressive metagame where, you're just not enjoying your experience overall. I don't think that's a service or a satisfaction to any player of any game. And so that's where I would like to see Destiny personally is minor adjustments might be necessary. I don't know if we need a ban list. I don't know if we need hardcore errata where cards have totally different effects than what was printed on the card. We obviously need something to change. And, I trust that the developers can make educated and wise decisions to help the game become much more healthy for the players, because the game as a whole is a game. It's fine. The game works. It's just that the players aren't enjoying it, and that's a problem. That's a huge problem, is when your player base isn't having fun, it's not a great place for the game to be as a whole. And that's what I'm getting at is, I hope things change. I really do. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this week. And, if you've got some thoughts, you've got some ideas, you've got a point or a counterpoint, feel free to leave a response in the comments on Facebook or respond on Twitter. Send us a message. We'd love to hear what the community thinks. We're all in this boat together. Most of us want to see the game, live and thrive and do well. And really, it's in the hands of FFG to make that happen. So we hope it happens. And, we'd love to see this thing just go on as long as humanly possible. So thank you once again for listening. We'd like to, do a quick little shout out to some of our friends out there in the, media content creation land. So, if you haven't listened to or checked out some of these guys, we recommend them very highly. So 3-Man Meta, we were recently a guest on, a 2-part podcast that they did, and we had a lot of fun talking about, the state of the game. We talked about the European nationals and a lot of things. There's also, Severin Gaming Network and Starkiller Base on YouTube. Those guys are pumping out a lot of content with deck techs, tournament reports, assessments of, different stratagems and ways to play decks to your advantage and do well. And, last but not least, our great friends over at Artificery. We love hanging out and talking and playing games with those guys. So if you're listening to us, we really recommend, checking out all of those and more. There's a lot of great content out in the community that can help just broaden the scope of understanding and skill in the Destiny gameplay meta. So thank you once again for listening. We hope you have a wonderful week, and may the Force be with you.